Hola.
Hola. Buenas noches.
Buenas
Oh,
noches.
your Spanish is good. Hola a todos. La sesión va a ser en inglés, pero tenemos intérpretes, o sea que recuerden que eligiendo el mundito que está debajo en Zoom, pueden elegir el canal en español para escuchar la sesión en español. Y bueno, vamos a estar acá con Poli acompañándolos un poco de la mano técnica, o sea que si necesitan algo que en Zoom nos pueden contactar. Y les invitamos a todos a conectarse a Zoom siempre con su nombre y apellido, a estar presentes en la sesión. Okay, Kiro.
Okay.
The session is all yours.
Okay, thank you. Buenas noches. Yo soy Kiro Harada. Unfortunately, that's the only Spanish I can speak, except un cerveza, por favor. So I will start the session in English, and you are always welcome to interrupt me for questions. So I will talk about the Scrum patterns today, and I'd just like to know that how many of you are doing or developing something with Scrum? Could you react with hand? Okay. So I expect many of you have a basic knowledge of Scrum, and then I will not talk much about Scrum itself, but I'll talk about the Scrum patterns perspective. Okay, I'll start sharing the screen and then start the presentation. Okay. So do you see them?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. So we'll start. So it's a picture in Portugal, where we had a Scrum Plop conference to prepare Scrum patterns. And it's a beautiful one. And I'm Kiro Harada. I'm an Agile coach or kind of software developer and book writer, translator, interpreter, trainer, whatever. And then I will talk about Scrum patterns today. So then I will start with a famous picture here. I think you have already seen this, right? You have seen a lot of times that, how software is requirement is misinterpreted, and then how badly it is translated and implemented. And then what the customer really needed is really delivered to the customer. But the picture itself is not originally from software. So I am looking for several books or other thing, and then this is the oldest one. So this is the oldest one, is about the early 20th centuries, almost maybe more than 100 years ago. And then it is about the picture of the praying tool in a school, elementary school. And the first one is a teacher requested it. And then the last one was Board of Education approved it. And then there's a lot of variations. And then it's what the students really wanted. Yeah, what the kids really wanted to pray. So there's the other one. And then it is now saying that it's a programmer, senior analyst. It is interpreted into software, how software requirement is treated. But even before software, understanding requirement is always hard. So by writing a document, by transferring information via document, it is very hard to share the intent or the context, how the artifact people created is used. And then, so there was a kind of understanding there's a problem here. So then about, it's almost 45 years ago, there was a book published. The name is Oregon Experiment. It's by Christopher Alexander, who is an architect. Yeah, designing building, design concepts. And then he did several experiments in the Oregon University, how to design their campus. And then he learned, so we need to have the user of the building involved in the designing process of the building to have the good building that the people can lively use that building. So then he continued the research, and then he researched the buildings or houses or townships. And then he created patterns that a good building or a good township, a good city would be look like. The book is called A Pattern Language. So the pattern thing in software is coming from this book. So it describes the situation where the building have to solve some kind of problem and then give some solution ideas, and also some other problem the solution may cause. So then they create a set of patterns that can be used together to create a good house, good building, good township. So it's a thick book, but it's worth reading if you're interested in a thing. So it's probably the first one you can try. Of course, you can try an easier, thinner one. So he continued the research. Oops. And then he created a timeless way of building. So he is talking about how he can continuously maintain and improve building so that the township will continue to flourish forever. It's a good thing, right? So considering about software is very little percentage of software is well maintained and then often abandoned and replaced with a new one. And then it causes a lot of pain for the developers, for the operators, for the customers, for the users as well. And then this guy, Christopher Alexander, created some kind of solutions to the problem of that gap. And then here's the backflip of a pattern language document, book, where he said, at the core is the idea that people should design for themselves their own houses, streets, and communities. This idea comes simply from observation that most of the wonderful places of the world were not made by architects, but by the people. So then, that's the idea. Why don't you improve the actual user who stays with that artifact longer than actual builder involved in a design process so that we can create better artifact? So then in his book, he created a way of describing good design in patterns. We used to create a design as a path or library that should be implemented together with it, but often the case is these parts won't fit well together. Instead, so he created a form of patterns. The pattern is about describe a solution for a specific context. So then the pattern solves a problem and then changes the context, the resulting context. And then the solution itself is concrete enough that the people who can read the problem can apply the solution. But when people apply the solution, they have multiple ways to using the patterns. So it's a bit difficult to understand with vaguely. So we'll share the pattern form here. The pattern has a name, maybe have optional alias that describes the problem and context, and forces that you can actually do not have control. And then you have a solution, and you may have some examples. And then after applying a pattern, you have a resulting context. There may be a background rationale and known uses, and also the pattern related. So let's see some of the patterns we can actually look at. Okay, oops. Oops. So it's a pattern described in a pattern language book. It's teenager's cottage. Yeah, it seems that many of you are very young. You remember very young teenage days. And then you started having a conflict with the parents. And then it's also a good time for individual to build how they can manage themselves. They have to self-sufficient. They want to learn how to clean rooms, how to make the neat, and how to wake up in the morning. But it is really dangerous to let the teenager live by themselves at once. So then there's a solution here, teenager's cottage. So create a separate room in a house a little bit away from the main house so that the teenagers start learning to live himself, herself. And then it avoids an unnecessary conflict with the parents. And then teenager gradually understand how to maintain a household. So it's a pattern, teenager cottage. But keep going on. Teenager is not a teenager for a long time, just for a few years. They will become adults, and then they will go properly out. And then what should I do with teenager's cottage? There's a separate room for it. And then there's a known use after the teenager cottage. So there's a next pattern to it. It's old age cottage. So after teenager grown up, they create a family. So then it's the parents' turn to use the cottage, to have a separate area to keep their own, but it's been a good distance from their kids' family. So then we can get help if necessary. So if these are how the pattern goes on. So then what the pattern? It's something you build or instruction how to build it. So it changes the communication path or it changes organization structure. The previous example is about the family, but it can be applied in an organization or something. And then it contributes to quality of life or quality of people's life. So it makes your life better and lively. So then the pattern, there are a lot of them. So it can be applied in sequence. Many patterns work together. And then using a simple pattern to tackle a complex problem, and then the sequence of patterns can solve or can help solving a complex problem. And then the pattern should be proven there's many known uses. It's a good record that the pattern worked very well. And the pattern itself is a process to create a form and the form itself. And then active local repair. So a small repair makes the whole system better. So there's a Chinese character at the end. So it's a word for repair, but the word itself reads repair better. By repairing it, it becomes better than the original. So it is called shuzen. So pattern is not a new invention, new way of doing it. So if you have a new way of doing it, keep doing it, and then it is used many times widespread, and then it could be a pattern. Or it's not automatable. So if automated, machine can help you a lot, but it has human elements. So it must be complete. So if you see it, you know how to use it. So if you heard the pattern name or pattern description and you don't know how to use it, it's not a pattern yet. And then the pattern is always about the group of people and usually called community. And then it's not a property of the system. Okay, so it's a background how pattern was developed in a building industry and then how it was applied. Let's get back a little bit back to software. So this is a book published since 1990. Ooh, already 30 years ago. It is called Wicked Problem Writer Solutions. So it is talking about the software problem that if we want to solve an existing problem, and then when we apply the solution, the problem changes its shape. So it's wicked. So it describes how difficult software development processes are 30 years ago. And then it describes most of the problem the Agile manifesto or Agile software development tried to solve. And then it's a book in 1990. It talks about sashimi approach. Clearly, they read the Nonaka's new product development paper. So instead of separating development process by functions, sashimi approach recommend that there's an overlap of people so that the people work together as well as sharing information with document together. It is much faster and better quality. So it is called sashimi approach because the slice of fish skin, fish sashimi layers overlap together. So then there's a question. If sashimi works better, why don't you put everything together at the same time? And then probably that the book is the first one actually describe the name of Scrum. The book says it's the Scrum approach. It is called all at once. Instead of separating phases, like before this one, engineering prototyping, requirement design, prototype, acceptance, we do everything together. And then we go, all right, to the target. And then it was called Scrum approach 30 years ago. It's a long time ago. Actually, the book contains a lot of interesting topic. Yeah, one of my favorite picture is here. It's a handcuff approach. It's a, why don't you connect the domain expert, user domain expert and programmer together with a handcuff so that they have to work together all the time. It may be it may solve a lot of problems. And then the on-site customer is something like that, where extreme programming says. Okay, so then that's the situation in the 1990s. Software is always, difficult. Then in 1993, there's a group called form called Hillside Group. So it's a group of people in a software developer who find the Scrum pattern language offering from the Christopher Alexander may be applied to software. So they get together and then they're thinking about how they can use patterns in software development. So then the first book of their group was Design Patterns. I think many of you already know. It's a design patterns for elements of reusable object-oriented software. It's a book by Gango 4. So it directly applies pattern in object-oriented software design, and it worked. So after design patterns came out, programmers started using patterns to design their software. And later, the recent software development like JavaScript or Python or other things, they incorporated the part of the language. So design pattern changed the way how we design programming language. Then the application of the pattern software industry didn't stop there. So we have a lot of pattern books. Just some of them. So the number of the pattern books keep going. I hope that some of you have already read this. And then good thing is that pattern books usually last longer. If you write the specific designing techniques that depends on the specific platform, the book won't last long. So it becomes obsolete. If you write a book about, say, Android, iOS, it'll be obsolete within a year. The technology changes. But the pattern, the way how to deal with the problem, the recurring problem, it has a better chance of delivering good information, knowledge, or wisdom, how to tackle the problem better than the specific concrete solution catalog. So the patterns like this. I think you know WikiWeb, right? Wikipedia is one of the one. So wiki is a way people can write when people come to the website. The c2.com is the oldest wiki page created by Ward Cunningham. But what's the purpose of WikiWeb for? The original purpose of wiki is to write patterns. So as I told you, a pattern is a community effort, community process. And then we have a community of people to write patterns. And then, so we keep writing and changing, updating, editing again and then again and again. And then Word come up with the idea. So we can create a good platform that community can create the artifact document together. So that's wiki. And a good application of wiki is, you already know, Wikipedia. By having people can offer knowledge, updating it. So it's a group of wisdom can create a huge encyclopedia that the professional editors needed for decades. So it's a good move, and then pattern is useful for it. Okay, we go around all the way around the patterns, and then let's get back a little bit to Scrum, but not straight back here. In 1994, there's a paper published by Jim Copling, who was an AT&T Bell Lab researcher at that time. So he wrote a paper, Boran Software Craftsmanship, a new look at process quality and productivity. So it's probably the first trial using pattern to design software organization. So instead of looking into the software design, he's looking for the software development process and organization. So he tried to apply pattern to the organizational structure of software development. And then a year later, there's a paper called Development Process Generative Pattern Language. So it's a pattern language that creates software development process. So it's it's 25 years ago. It's have a lot of good insight about how to create good software. Named space stable basis is that we create a baseline that we find that the software is working there. And then from that named stable basis, we keep going on the development process. I think you have used the command git rebase, right? Git rebase is actually updating the named stable basis. So it has a impact of the current development process. And then pattern is refined again and again. So then the group, Jim Copley and Neil Harrison, who were the co-worker at AT&T, they refined the patterns of this generated pattern language. And then they published organizational patterns of agile software development. So it's more about the structure of the organization. Then it is actually after the agile software development, then the name has changed, the organization patterns of agile software development. But the research started many years ago and before Agile Manifesto came in. So it's a kind of patterns, the work proven solution of the organizational design, and then published it. It's 15 years ago. So then it's a kind of pattern sequence, the how patterns can be applied to create a good organization. So yeah, so it's still a good book. So I recommend reading it. But so let's see a little bit about sequence, and then let's see one patterns here. Here's one called sacrifice 1%. So before that pattern, so someone always make progress. So if the team member, all the team members are interrupted from outside, the progress of the development of the team is at risk. So there's a pattern here, sacrifice 1 person. Assign 1 person to take care of all the interruptions so that other team member can do development work and then make progress. And then sacrifice 1 person actually can be a daycare or firewalls, yeah, from protect the team from other interruptions, or mercenary analysts working as a mercenary so that the team can progress better. Does this sound familiar for you? Especially about the Scrum folks. Okay, that's the origin, one of the origin of Scrum Master. Yeah, Scrum Master, your real name is sacrifice 1 person. Oops. No, it's a bad name. But it's a originally from organization patterns, and then we have created a better name, and then to set up a set of patterns so that we can do agile software development better. Almost at the same time of the generative pattern language in Uppsala 95, there's a workshop, and the business object design and the implementation workshop was run, chaired by Jeff Sutherland. And then the one, it was published was the Scrum Development Process by Ken Schwaber. So it's a first paper about development process about Scrum. How it was like that, there's a paper in 1996 by the paper by Ken Schwaber. The title is very interesting, Control the Chaos, Living on the Edge. So it's a nice paper. Take a look at it. And then it talks about how the Scrum looked like at the same time, at that time, okay, 25 years ago. Sprint, consecutive multiple sprint, and then visualize a large pressure cooker. Scrum development work is done in it. Gases sticking out of the pressure cooker provide detailed information on the inner working, including backlog, risk, problem, changes, and issues. But you cannot open the cooker. Development process there. If you open the cooker during the cooking process, you will destroy the dish. Okay, information are out, but the team is autonomously decide how to do it and develop it. It is an initial Scrum development process description. So the Scrum itself is changes a little bit. So by the time, there's no product owner described in the Scrum development process paper at this point. And then actually business requirements are considered impediments for the development team. So it is more like shutting off the external interruption to keep the development moving forward. It's more about influenced by the organizational pattern. Then after 5 years, 2000, there's a new paper, and then actually it is composed by Mike Beadle. Yeah, one of the old Scrum practitioner there. And then he wrote a paper titled Scrum, an extension pattern language for hyper-productive software development. So actually, so instead of writing the pattern is Scrum itself, so he worked to create the pattern language of the Scrum as extension to the organizational patterns as I described before. So then, so these namespace basis, developer control process, firewall, or these are from the organization patterns. And then a little bit the darker gray one is a Scrum patterns. So Scrum is now described as the extension pattern language. So then 2001, Agile Manifesto came out. So by the time it's organization patterns. And then it's a good description how Scrum works. So this is how the things are related. And then the work started about 2009 that if we are actually creating Scrum as an extension of the pattern language of the organization patterns, why don't we start writing Scrum as a pattern language? So then it's a Scrum pattern community. I'm one of the members of. So we started working on to create a Scrum as pattern in 2009. And then we actually started working together periodically, annually from 2010. So this is a Scrum Plop web page that we actually plan to have a Plop this twice this year, but because of this COVID situation, 2 of them were canceled. We plan to resume the annual one next March in Netherlands, but we do not know. We are looking forward to move forward to it. But for the last 10 years, okay, more than 10 years, we took together and then we write patterns and update it and then try to get together. So this is one of the pattern writing venue in Portugal. So we usually get together a week and then we keep updating patterns and rewriting a document. So, oops. This is Jeff Sutherland, and then we're talking about how the first Scrum team applies Scrum patterns in sequence. So this is one of the pattern sequence that he used for the first development of the Scrum team. So first they have a development piece and vision, so they are small and stable. So there's a producer's role. And then it's a small, it's a collocated together and then created a circle of trust together. Even though it is small, the team is cross-functional and autonomous. And then self-organizing team. And then developer orders work plan at a sprint backlog. So developer decides how to work on it, and then it's divided into sprints. Yeah, it looked like ordinary, more and more look like ordinary Scrum. Scrum Master is not here yet. The product owner is not here yet. But it gradually applying patterns, then we are actually making the update how we develop software. So then we are creating Scrum core as patterns. We actually have all of them. We'll show you later after the slide is done. Then patterns always work together and the patterns applied in a sequence. So it's a pattern. There's an existing example, a pattern applied this way. So A, B, D, C, and A, B, C, D, F, and AEFs. If we have 3 instances of the team who apply the pattern that way, it can be written as that the bottom graph. So by giving the graph that the team can decide how they apply Scrum pattern to follow to get the benefit of Scrum. And then this one is called pattern language. So the pattern language create a whole, and then what the whole of Scrum, the whole has a structured nature. So what is a product of the Scrum or Scrum patterns? Yeah, Scrum is the framework. So Scrum creates something. Yeah, actually Scrum created a process where the autonomous team create product. Actually, the Scrum pattern language trying to create a library Scrum team so that it can keep delivering values to outside, and then it keeps learning, getting feedback outside from it. So after 10 years work, the book is out. So it's online. And it's also a paper book available. If you have interest, then take a look at it. And then here about 4 or 5 minutes, I like to look into some of the patterns here. So Do you see the browser screen now?
Yeah, we do.
Okay. So it's a pattern called Scrum Master Incognito. So if you have a Scrum Master, serving development team is supposed to self-organize to run a daily Scrum. But if the Scrum Master taking care of the Scrum team too much, team tend to report to Scrum Master. You see a lot of situation like that, right? So then, in that case, even though Scrum Master does not want to become a manager or a leader or a task assigner, it sometimes is easy. So development team start behaving like that. So then, Scrum Master really like to have the development team members interact together. So Scrum Master first going around so that not all the team members try to report to him or her. So then, but then still the team member try to report or try to get Scrum Master control the developer, and then there's a solution for you. So here's a picture. Do you see where the Scrum Master is? Do you find it? Oops. Oops. Scrum Master is here, laying down on the floor. To show that the daily Scrum is for the developer. Yeah, Scrum Master becomes faceless. So then, oops. So it's a scrumbook.org website. It has a content of the Scrum. And then it has a good knowledge how Scrum was developed and why the current Scrum guide says that. So this is another pattern called scrumming the Scrum. So it's a pattern of removing impediments. And then if sometimes if the impediment stays for long enough, it becomes a kind of status quo, and then team forget how to solve it. And then it can do find a good impediment and then get the whole team together to bust the problem. Other thing, interesting one. What a good one. Okay. This is one of a favorite one. They called whack them all. And then if you are Scrum, and then there's a product backlog, then sprint backlog then. And then if you find the problem, what should the team do? So if you do not fix the problem, and then if the bug survives the sprint review, it may be released. Your bug will become part of specification, and then it becomes very hard to solve it. So whack them all says, developer has autonomy. You can fix a problem anytime. To make your product increment very good quality, free of known bugs, team has the autonomy to fix the bugs immediately. So once the product is released, and then if the user recognizes that the behavior of the product, bug fix need to be put in a product backlog and then have to be prioritized into the sprint backlog by the product owner. But it slows you down. If you find it, fix it now. That whack-the-mole says. Yeah, it's a balancing. So if you have so many bugs on it, and then you're always working them all in a sprint, your velocity become unstable. So then you have to apply earlier patterns before use the velocity smaller, the higher quality thing faster. So in that way, so this paper describes the background information and then how you can solve it, and then the solution resulted context as well as potential problem it can cause newly. And then you can again looking for another new patterns and find a good way to make your team and your product better. Okay, so let's get back to it. And the book was out last year after 10 years of time, and we are still looking for your patterns. If you find a working solution, usually we need a rule of three. So you have to have 3 instances of that the pattern work to solve the problem. And then you know the good way to solve the problem. Pre-submit your pattern idea to Scrum Prop. We will help you to write as a pattern. And then hopefully in the long run, it can be a part of the next version Scrum book, or hopefully it finds a way into the Scrum guide eventually. Okay, so that's done part of my presentation. I think it's about almost 10 p.m. now. And many of you are sleepy. And then thank you very much for listening. Muchas gracias.
Thank you. Do we have time for some Q&A?
Yeah, so I'm okay. It's AM here. So
okay, so we have I think we have 10 more minutes of time. So if anybody has a question for Kiro.
Yes, I have a question. What about the update of the Scrum Guide? You will take care to update the partners or
no, so Scrum Guide is now taking care of Jeff and Ken, and then Jeff has been a great contributor to the Scrum Patterns group, and then many of the things are referring to the Scrum Patterns already published.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, Scrum Guide is the new version is almost out. They're trying to make it thin and easier to read, and then very kind of purified version of Scrum rules. And then to understand the rationale, how Scrum rule is like that, I hope the Scrum patterns will give you an idea why the Scrum has a rules like these. The other thing? Thank you. Thank you, Johan.
¿Alguien tiene una pregunta? Cualquier cosa la quiere hacer en español, la podemos traducir.
Yeah, you can type in the chat page so I can see the translation.
Hello.
So
I just want to ask you about a Scrum book. It's the first time for me here, and it's the first time for me speaking about the Scrums. So is this a book for starters?
I think it's okay to read a Scrum book with starters, but I recommend read the book together with somebody else.
Okay.
So it's about the teamwork, the group people, how group of people work together. So if you start working in a Scrum team, so you can read when in a retrospective or other times.
Okay.
Probably, I hope that by just reading the name of the patterns, will give you some idea. And then if you're interested, just try to read through.
Okay. Thank you.
So also there's a book reading group happening in Europe and the United States. And then if you find one, you can join. And then it's doing a community reading. I'm organizing one here, but it is very hard for you to join because of time zone differences. Sorry, I couldn't listen to the presentation of your time since it's 12 hours opposite. I just woke up a few hours ago. And also, so please feel free to write me. I'm Kiro Harada. So there's not so many Kiro Harada on Facebook or LinkedIn. So just send me a message that I have a question about your presentation where I didn't understand. Please feel free.
Hi, Kiro. I was seeing the presentation on this related to this pattern or organizational pattern. And there is something that I really connect that with, which is system dynamics. And I was wondering how if there is something that you would recommend to further study in relation to patterns and system dynamics.
So yeah, the organization patterns book 15 years ago described a lot about how the organization pattern emerged with it. So you can have a lot about how these affected with it. So the other thing is that, do you know the book called Process Dynamics, Modeling and Control by Babatunde Ogunneke?
No.
It's a system dynamics, it's a chemical engineering book. But it's a kind of source of empirical process control of Scrum. So you may be interested in it. So does this answer your question?
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, so if you find anything, please feel free, so I can follow up.
Kiro, there's a question on chat from Natalia. And
Mhm.
she'd like to know if you recommend something to motivate people to do the retrospective meeting.
So the first tip is don't try to motivate people. It demotivates people for sure. The one favorite way is that the retrospective, I usually buy a whole cake, not separated. But if you want to enjoy a cake, the team want to collaborate together, how to make slice it, how to slice it together. The other thing is that, cooking together or fixing tea together, that is usually a good activity. So even though the team are not really willing to join, so my favorite one is ice cream. Create a huge gallon cup of ice cream and then asking team together, there's no fridge here, you have to fix this. So then people start to get together fixing the problem. And then after having enough sugar in the brain, it's a good time to discuss about how to make the process better. I think it does work for you too. Please give it a try if you have a chance.
Ice cream, sure, at least in Argentina, yeah.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, so I think it's a good time for you to have some self-leisure and some sleep. So thank you very much for joining. And then I really enjoyed. So I will try to come in person in the South America this year, but this situation prevented me from doing that. But I will really love to come. So so Hiro visited us early this year. This is my turn next time. Okay,
I hope so.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Adios.
much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye,
Bye.
Hiro.